dreams were planted in red soil and watered with hope. A small town on the edge of Georgia, where mornings smelled like dew and roasted corn, and life moved slower than the river that cut through it. That's where Naomi Reed grew up, barefoot, sun-kissed, and full of fire. Her mama, Mrs. Williams, worked 2 jobs and prayed through every storm. Her daddy, gone too soon, left behind a weathered Bible, an old truck, and a lesson that hard work never breaks a soul, it shapes it. From an early age, Naomi was different. While other girls dreamed of weddings and fine clothes, Naomi dreamed of city skylines, offices with glass walls, and her name on something that mattered. She'd help her mother sell vegetables at the roadside market, notebook in hand, sketching ideas for a business she couldn't yet name. Her mama would chuckle and say, "Baby, the Lord didn't give you a small mind for small things. Just remember where you came from when you get there." Naomi would smile. "Yes, ma'am," she'd say, but inside, she promised herself, "One day, I'll build something that makes her proud." When high school ended, Naomi packed her small suitcase, 1 pair of heels, 3 dresses, and all her courage, and boarded a bus to Atlanta. The city was nothing like home. It was loud, ruthless, and glittering with people who seemed born to belong. She wasn't. But she would learn. The first few months were brutal. She moved from couch to couch, ate instant noodles, and went to interview after interview. Each will call you felt like a brick in her stomach. Until one morning, she walked into a towering glass building with the words Grant and Wells Holdings carved into stone. She didn't know it then, but that was where her new life would begin. The HR manager frowned at her resume. "You don't have any corporate experience," he said. Naomi's hands trembled slightly. "No, sir," she replied softly, "but I learn fast, and I don't quit easy." Something about her honesty made him pause. 2 days later, she got the call. She was hired, secretary, floor 12. Naomi's first day was chaos, phones ringing, papers flying, and a boss everyone whispered about, Mr. Charles Grant, the company's co-founder. They said he was brilliant and terrifying. But Naomi didn't scare easy. She studied everything, how meetings ran, how reports were written, how Mr. Grant spoke to the board. At lunch, while others scrolled their phones, she took notes. At night, while the city slept, she watched business lectures online and practiced typing until her fingers ached. She wasn't just working a job, she was studying a world. One evening, Mr. Grant caught her still in the office after hours. He stood by the door, briefcase in hand. "You're still here?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Naomi said. "Just finishing tomorrow's reports." He nodded, impressed but trying not to show it. "You know," he said quietly, "you can't climb a mountain in one night." Naomi smiled. "No, sir," she said. "But I can take a few more steps before I sleep." That night, as he left, he knew this girl wasn't ordinary. The months turned into years. Naomi became the one people relied on, calm in chaos, firm in truth. When crises hit, she didn't complain. She solved. When others gave excuses, she found results. Still, there were challenges. Office whispers about the girl from nowhere. Supervisors who tried to take credit for her work. Days when she wanted to quit and call her mama, just to hear someone say she was doing fine. But she never gave in. Every night, she'd look out from her tiny apartment window at the Atlanta skyline and whisper, "I didn't come this far just to watch other people's dreams come true." One evening, she mailed her mama a small envelope. Inside was her first company paycheck and a short note. "Mama, we made it to the city. It's hard, but I'm harder." Her mother cried when she opened it, tears of pride and answered prayer. By the end of her third year at Grant & Wells, Naomi was more than a secretary. She was the quiet force behind successful projects, the voice Mr. Grant trusted when making decisions. He saw something rare: discipline with grace, integrity with vision. And one day, after a major meeting, he called her into his office. He looked at her and said, "Naomi, remind me again, where did you say you're from?" She smiled. "A small town outside Macon, sir." He nodded slowly. "Then you've come a long way, Miss Reed. Keep going." As she left the office, her heart beat faster than ever. It wasn't a promotion, not yet. But it was a promise. That night, Naomi walked home under city lights, her heels clicking against the pavement, her head held high. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. And deep inside, she whispered a prayer. "Lord, give me strength to build something worth remembering." Naomi Reed was no longer just the girl who fetched coffee and took notes. 3 years at Grant & Wells had sharpened her, polished the edges of her small-town humility into quiet confidence. Yet, the climb was far from easy. Each morning began before sunrise. She'd rise from her one-bedroom apartment in Decatur, slip into a neatly pressed blouse, and take the crowded train downtown. She knew exactly where she wanted to be, not just on time, but ahead. Grant & Wells was a battlefield of ambition. People smiled with their mouths but competed with their eyes. Naomi learned that quickly. She observed every meeting like a student at war, taking mental notes of who spoke with conviction and who wavered when challenged. She also learned that being a woman in a white-collar firm meant she had to work twice as hard to be noticed once. So she did. When others left at 5, Naomi stayed. When others complained, Naomi created solutions. And slowly, the same people who once overlooked her began coming to her for advice. Still, life outside those glass walls wasn't kind. Her mother's health began to fail. The long hours and stress of years spent providing had taken a toll. Naomi would rush from the office, heels in hand, to catch a bus home for the weekend, sitting by her mother's bedside as they prayed together under the dim light of a kerosene lamp. "Don't you worry about me, baby," her mama would whisper. "You just keep climbing. You're almost there." Those words burned into Naomi's spirit. The following Monday, back at work, Mr. Grant called her into his office. He was preparing to hand over a major project, a partnership with a European investor, and he needed someone reliable to oversee logistics. "You've got the discipline," he said. "But this won't be easy. You'll be working with executives who won't see you as their equal." Naomi nodded. "Then I'll just have to change their minds, sir." That was the beginning of the real climb. She faced condescension in boardrooms, subtle smirks, side comments, and patronizing tones. Some called her sweetheart or young lady, never Ms. Reed. But Naomi didn't fight with words, she fought with excellence. Her reports were flawless. Her deadlines were early. Her presentations spoke louder than any insult could. By the end of that fiscal year, Grant & Wells closed the biggest deal in its history, and Naomi had played a key role in it. Mr. Grant called her in again. "You did well," he said simply. "You've earned your place here." He promoted her to executive assistant to the CEO, a position that placed her at the heart of every major decision. Her salary tripled overnight, but what mattered more was the trust she'd gained. Yet, even at her peak, loneliness crept in. She had built a career but had no one to share it with. Her friends from home were getting married, posting pictures of babies and backyard picnics, while she spent her nights reviewing spreadsheets. Sometimes, when the city lights glowed through her apartment window, she'd whisper, "Lord, I'm grateful, but I'm also tired." Fate, however, has a way of rewarding persistence. One evening, as she left work, her heel broke on the marble floor of the lobby. A man nearby, a visiting consultant from another firm, bent down, offering a smile. "Rough day?" he asked. "Just another Tuesday," she said, laughing softly. His name was Derek Cole, a financial strategist from Chicago, tall, warm, and effortlessly kind. They met again during a business summit a few weeks later. Then coffee turned to dinner, and dinner turned into something deeper. Derek wasn't intimidated by her success, he admired it. He saw in her not just a driven professional, but the girl who had fought for every step of her future. Their love grew slowly, built on late-night talks and mutual respect. For the first time in years, Naomi felt seen, not as an assistant or an achiever, but as a woman who deserved rest, laughter, and love. Still, her climb wasn't over. When Mr. Grant announced his retirement, the company was left without a steady leader. The board began searching for a new CEO. Naomi, though qualified, never imagined they'd consider her until Mr. Grant himself recommended her name. "Naomi," he said one morning, "you've carried this company on your back for years. Don't you think it's time you stood at the front?" Her heart raced. Fear whispered in one ear, faith in the other. She accepted the challenge. The months that followed were grueling: negotiations, presentations, and a room full of skeptical executives. But Naomi stood firm, confident, poised. She wasn't the country girl anymore. She was the woman who had mastered her climb. When the board finally cast their votes, the announcement came in a single sentence. Effective immediately, Ms. Naomi Reed will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer of Grant & Wells Holdings. Her world fell silent. Then came applause. Tears welled in her eyes as she thought of her mother's prayers, the bus ride that started it all, and the nights she almost gave up. That evening, she called home. "Mama," she said through tears, "we made it, I'm the CEO." Her mother's voice trembled with pride. "I always knew you would be, baby. You were born to build." Naomi stood by her window again, but this time, she wasn't just looking at the skyline, she was part of it. The climb had been long, hard, and lonely. But every step had brought her closer to becoming not just successful, but significant. And deep inside, she knew the best chapters of her story were yet to be written. The morning sunlight spilled through the wide glass windows of Naomi's new office, a corner view of Atlanta that once felt like a dream too distant to touch. Her name gleamed on the door, Naomi Reed, Chief Executive Officer. She stood there for a moment, in quiet awe. The country girl who once sold vegetables by the roadside was now running one of the largest firms in the city. The skyline no longer intimidated her, it reflected her journey. Every tower, every light, it all mirrored her climb. But success, as she soon learned, came with a price. Her new role demanded more than just hard work. It demanded wisdom, patience, and resilience. Every decision she made rippled through hundreds of employees. Every mistake carried weight. There were sleepless nights, endless meetings, and constant pressure from investors. Sometimes she'd sit in her office long after everyone had gone home, staring at her reflection in the window and whispering, "Lord, am I doing enough? Am I still me?" But then, there were moments that made it all worth it. The days she implemented new programs to help young women in business, the scholarships she launched in her mother's name, and the way people looked at her, not with pity or doubt, but with respect. Naomi had built something that mattered. And beside her, through it all, was Derek, her steady anchor, the man who had walked into her life when she least expected love. They married in a small ceremony under an oak tree, surrounded by family and friends. Naomi wore a simple white dress, her mother's necklace glimmering at her neck. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Derek leaned close and whispered, "You've conquered the world, Naomi. Now let's build our own." Their love was gentle but strong, a partnership rooted in faith and mutual purpose. A year later, they welcomed a daughter, Amara, her name meaning grace. The first time Naomi held her, something inside her shifted. The woman who had built empires now felt the humbling power of creation. Late at night, as Amara slept in her arms, Naomi often thought about the long road behind her, the small town, her mother's prayers, the years of sacrifice. Every hardship, every tear, every lonely evening had led to this, peace. One evening, she took a drive back home to Georgia. The air smelled the same, fresh earth, distant rain, the hum of cicadas. She parked by the old roadside stall where she once helped her mother sell vegetables. It was gone now, replaced by a small market built in her mother's name, the Williams Community Hub. Naomi smiled through tears. Her mother had passed on a few months before Amara was born. She never got to hold her granddaughter, but Naomi knew she was watching. Standing there, Naomi whispered, "Mama, I kept my promise. I made you proud." The wind rustled through the trees as if to answer. She walked through the small market, greeting the townspeople who remembered her as that little Reed girl. They spoke of her with pride now, the hometown girl who had made it big and never forgot her roots. Later that night, as the stars stretched across the country sky, Naomi sat outside the old family home, Amara sleeping peacefully beside her. Derek joined her, his hand resting on hers. "You did it," he said softly. "No," Naomi replied with a faint smile. "We did it." She gazed at the horizon, a place that once represented escape now felt like home. The journey had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also taught her that true success isn't measured in titles or wealth. It's in how many lives you lift, how many hearts you touch, and how deeply you love. Naomi Reed, once a barefoot dreamer, was now a woman who had built her life from the dust of determination and the fire of faith. Her story wasn't one of luck. It was one of grace, grit, and growth. As dawn broke, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, watching the first light stretch across the fields. She had come from the soil, and now, she had bloomed. From a dusty roadside in Georgia to the highest floor of a glass tower, Naomi Reed proved that no dream is too small, no beginning too humble, because when faith fuels the climb, even a country girl can touch the stars. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more inspiring tales, only here on Soulthread.